Right. Hello, everyone. So this is our first people and business little discussion forum, where we're going to be talking about flexible working and changing cultures. As you're aware now, the session is being recorded, and just ask that, when you're not actually speaking, stay muted, and everybody keep the cameras on, apart from Jill, who's allowed not to. So the format today was, the plan was to have it as an actual panel question and answer, and then open it out to other members of the audience. But as we seem to have quite a select audience today, Sean, I think we'll just run it. You just dip in as you want to. We won't make you wait to a Q&A at the end. All right. So I'll put some questions and just join in and ask or give your experiences as is convenient. So I'll start with letting my panelists introduce themselves. So do you want to say a few words, Dean?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dean Love. I'm from Hewitt Recruitment. I work as the Business Development Manager. We are a multi-sector recruiter, and we specialise across predominantly across the 3 counties area. So this is a real big topic, flexible and hybrid working, that we've been having lots of chats with clients. So it'd be quite interesting to talk about that today, and just to see different perspectives, different viewpoints, and also some hopefully some those different views that we can then take to our clients to give them some opportunities to have something to think about. Thank you, Kay.
Thanks, Dean. Glenn.
Afternoon, everybody. My name's Glenn from Springboard to the Future, and we do leadership and teamwork in a hybrid world. Because one of the things we realised as lockdowns went on and people were closeted away in their studies and on their bedroom spare beds and in their studies, was actually the world had changed. I've been very lucky in the fact that I've been working in a flexible or hybrid or remote way for nearly 20 years, and I've learned quite a few things about it on the way through, but we've realised that actually this has suddenly become relevant to everybody. So I'm looking forward to, as Dean says, learning about different perspectives from both the other panellists and the people we've got in the room, because one of the things we have come to the conclusion is there's no one size fits all. Everybody's got to learn something different. Thanks, Kay.
Thanks, Glenn, and hi, Matt. So I'm Kay Hampton from 8 Legal. We provide very people-focused HR and employment law support to SMEs. And I also do work with mediation to help businesses resolve conflict at work and rebuild relationships. So, Matt, you kind of missed the blurb at the start, but we're going to run this in a very informal way because we've got quite a small crowd. So feel free to sort of raise your hand and chip in as you want to. Okay.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Morning.
So,
or afternoon.
Oh, it is now, isn't it? Yeah. My first thought really is I think we often talk about kind of flexible working and hybrid working, and people use the terms interchangeably, whereas I don't think they're quite the same. And I was quite particular that I wanted this to be called flexible working rather than just purely hybrid. So if I could just start by saying, Glenn, what do the 2 terms mean to you?
No, you just made a really important point there. From the point of view of if I think back to my working in a company days, flexible working was almost used to describe school run mums that used to come in after they'd done the school run, disappear off at 3:30, might do term time only contracts. It was very much they had discrete periods of time when they were in the office, but they wouldn't necessarily be a full-time or a dedicated part-time employee. Whereas now we've turned into this hybrid thing where it's work from anywhere, work at any time, depending on the organisation. And that for me is actually a far better description of flexible working. The snag is now the common vernacular is we are describing that as hybrid, and that is what we seem to be going forward with, which I'm actually very sad about, because what we're talking about is actually the proper ethos of flexible working.
Thanks, Glenn. How about you, Dean? Have you got a different take on that one?
Yeah, slightly different. I think they are completely two different aspects of a working model, whereas hybrid really describes your place of work, and really is only just about whether you work at home or a coffee shop or in the office, whereas flexible working, I think there's a lot more involved. So it does include your place of work, it does include your hours, it does include your contract and whether you're full-time or part-time. So I think that there is that you know, that total division between the hybrid and the flexible, and you can't really call it one or the other. But again, you know, flexibility working does include that place of work. I think the hybrid model really has just come in just because of COVID, really. Whereas before that, I worked in 26 years in recruitment, and there always has been some aspect of flexible working. And of course, that's for parents, and that's also for full-time and part-timers, really. So yeah, it's definitely two sides to the coin.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that always annoys me a bit is when people talk about hybrid working being flexible, whereas actually some forms of hybrid are any but. So your boss telling you you're in the office these 3 days and at home these 2 days, remotely flexible. And I think I saw some stats recently that said, so there was a survey where about half the people who responded said that they were more productive working from home, but only I think 1 in 4 actually had the choice of where they worked and how they sort of planned that working time out.
I think I think that people would say they're more productive at home, just to ensure that they're allowed to continue working from home, really. So.
Well, that's true. Yeah, kind of honest, I suppose. But on that kind of point, I'm hearing an awful lot, you know, employers wanting people back in the office, wanting to see them face to face, whereas employees seem to be putting a higher than ever value on flex and hybrid and being able to choose how and when they work. So it's a bit of maybe a disconnect there between expectations on the two sides. I'm guessing, Dean, you're pretty much at the sharp end of that in recruitment, and I wondered if you've got any thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's all about communication and really understanding, you know, what your employees want. It's okay if you're the MD and you're saying absolutely not. I think, you know, we shouldn't do any home working or hybrid models. It should be this and that's it. I think you're going to, you know, you could then be facing a problem of retention because there's so many companies offering that hybrid flexible model these days that if you haven't got some aspect of that or even thinking about it, then they say you're going to hamper your recruitment, you could hamper your retention. So yeah, I think we do advise in some aspects, you know, there is going to be manufacturing where people won't be able to do any home working. But so it's incorporating something along the lines of, okay, well, can we close early on a Friday? You know, just giving them something back, especially if the support teams are all working remotely or hybrid. So again, it's just making sure you're talking to every department in the business, making sure it's not just a one size fits all. It's very much an individual type of case by case basis these days.
How about you, Dan?
This issue about productivity is a really interesting one, and it shines a light on how do we measure people's effectiveness at work. So if I use my wife. She runs a finance team that run the finances for 8 schools. She's a great example of this. So she runs a small team of about 10 people, 12 depending on the part-time mix. There's only 2 full-timers in it, her and her deputy. And they have a set amount of work to do. They have to process 12,500 invoices per year. They have a number of statutory deadlines to meet in terms of filing the accounts and all the rest of it. A load of reporting stuff for the board. There has been no drop-off in productivity from working from home. So much so that the office they used to occupy has now been taken over by the school whose building it's in, so they can't go back to work. So I'm actually wondering if actually the issue here is we don't, for knowledge jobs, like how do you manage the success of, or measure the success of a project manager or somebody writing code or somebody writing copy? Actually, it's very, very difficult to measure their productivity in a meaningful way at the moment. So I'm wondering if actually we don't necessarily have the right tools to measure some jobs effectively to say, actually, we now know that you're maintaining the right level of productivity. If we focus on the outcomes, from the point of view of, is the customer getting what they want? Is our service levels where they need to be? Has there been a drop-off? If there has, what do we need to do to fix it? And if there hasn't, then obviously productivity is okay. So for me, it's all about trust. And actually, I think the issue is people want to see people in the office because then they can look over their shoulder and see what they're actually doing. It's all about seeing what's on screen.
Yeah. I think
sorry, go on. I was just going to say, going back to that you're writing code. We had a meeting the other day with an IT company, and they said that their developers only come in on a Monday now because they have been a lot more productive working from home, because they're not traveling to work, you know, they're not you know, taking extra cup of teas, or they're talking to people, and you know, they said they can really focus a lot more on doing the job at hand and getting that type of project finished a lot more quickly and with a lot more focus. And again, though, come back to that trust, isn't it? You know, if people are going to not work at home, they probably wouldn't work at work anyway, you know. So you know, it's it's just the type of person, really, I think.
Right, Claire, you've raised your hand. Is there something you wanted to?
Yeah, I just wanted to join in the conversation, if that's all right. It's just something that's really really interesting, because it's something that so I worked for an IT company for many years where my laptop was my office. So, you know, it was just kind of, and you know, some days you were more productive than others, but that's just natural, you know. And it's just like, some days I would work in the office and some days I would work from home because I wanted to get my washing done, and you know, and that kind of thing, and it just kind of, so that it makes it productive for, you know, home and at work as well. And I think when, at the time that I was doing that, my flatmates, my housemates were really kind of like, huh, what's she doing? Why is she working from home? How can she be doing this? You know, kind of thing. And the, you know, my housemate even barged in on me one day going, do some work. And I was on like a video call already. And I was like, wait, that kind of thing and stuff. But I think, you know, so it's something that, you know, I think the pandemic definitely has kind of opened everybody's eyes up to. But I think with anything, and anything to do with like change and things, people are so kind of like, we are so set in our ways that this new thing comes in, and it really, not only are we dealing with the stresses and strains of, and the you know, the dealing with, you know, ideas and all sorts of things like that we've got to deal with anyway, this whole brand new thing comes in that means that things are going to be different, working differently, people don't know how it works and that kind of thing, that I think has really, you know, is, I think we just need to be a little bit maybe calmer with people, and just let them not necessarily come to it in their own time, because people work in different, you know, some people are like, yeah, let's do this change, let's da 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 da, and then other people are like, okay, let me just think about it a bit, and then other people are like, yeah, no. But you know, it's just kind of, definitely, I think with the companies coming to terms with terminology as well.
And like, I think you're right that, I mean, I think COVID kind of sped this whole process up. I think it was already happening, but COVID kind of put rocket boosters on it, didn't it? And one of the things I think is quite interesting, there's this assumption about, you know, people, if they're in the office, they're productive. I saw some stats from an HBR article, and they'd come up with a figure that in an 8-hour day, people in the office on average were only productive for 2 hours and 53 minutes of that 8-hour day. And that's an assumption that just because you sat at your desk, you're productive is clearly just not remotely true. The other thing I think about the whole flexible working and hybrid working is there's been a move, it's been put, seems to have been put permanently on hold, but to make the right to request flexible working a day one right. Now, at first, like, you think for an employer, that looks like a nightmare. You employ somebody, you give them a job, they come to work and they slap a flexible working request on your desk. But actually, maybe that's part of what we need to make employers step back and think, okay, when I advertise this job, how flexible could it be? And actually build it in from the start when they're looking at creating the jobs and what the job spec is. So I think that's quite an interesting possibility. On one level, with my HR hat on, it's just like, oh my God, what a nightmare. But actually, I think it's short-term nightmare, but perhaps long-term it would be quite a positive change.
I think the other thing that is having, you know, putting the cat amongst the pigeons, is having a flexible working arrangement that's hybrid. If you're working hybrid from home, does it have to be 9 till 5? No, it might not be. It might be 12 till 8. And again, those throw up a lot more challenges for clients, but it just comes back to that flexibility and being able to be flexible, really, for the workers.
Yeah,
if they can do it.
Yeah, like you're saying, the 9 to 5 thing. So again, if you're working for an international company, for example, like, so a couple of different companies that I've worked for, you know, first thing in the morning, you're over Far East. In the middle of the day, you're, you know, here in Europe. And at the end of the day, you're America. And sometimes you had to either get up really early, you know, and then middle of the night or whatever is Australia. Do you know what I mean? It's just kind of, you know, there were times where you know, I know that I had to work right into, you know, the early hours because of, you know, because of needing to be in the right time zone with the person that we were with. So I think it really depends on, you know, why. And this is one that I'm kind of struggling with at the moment with, you know, running my own business and stuff, is that I don't have to do 9 to 5 anymore.
No.
However, that's so ingrained that, you know, if I'm not at my desk by 9 o'clock, even when I've given myself permission to, you know, go for a walk up the hill and start at 10, you know, kind of thing. It's kind of, I get a bit, you know, a little bit antsy or a little bit, you know, kind of thing.
That's quite interesting. That kind of moves on to what the next question was going to be, in that all this stuff involves quite a big culture change, and that's a lot of the time has got to come from the top. Now, obviously, if you're working for yourself, you are the top and you're everything else as well. But in a bigger organisation, I think there's got to be a real commitment from the top. And I'm just interested to hear from. So start with you, Glenn. You know, what do you think is needed from the top down to make this work?
I think commitment and effort, from the point of view of, there's an element of eating your own dog food. If you're going to allow people to work flexibly, then don't be coming into the office 6 days a week, 8 in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, because your behavior will be reflected down the organization. And in fact, there was a fabulous article, I think it was in about January of this year, where you had the CEO of Centrica, so an enormous organization, and he said, I'm working from home 2 days a week because HR have told me to. That is not a mandate for delivering a successful hybrid or flexible working program across your organization, because you've just passed the buck and also shown that you don't believe in it. Yeah. So actually, it's all about that belief and behavior at the top that then needs to then drive the behaviors through the organization.
No, I definitely concur. I think as well, it depending on the individual at the top, isn't it? You know, they might have meetings every single day, so they will be in the office that week. But like I say, just understanding that you don't have to come in every day. You know, it's like Elon Musk. I was sleeping in the office, and well, that doesn't mean to say everyone else has to, and it doesn't mean to say that they don't work just as hard as you in their contracted hours, just because they do work remotely. And I think it's just that understanding, and that, like I say, it's old school, so, and that's new. So it's retraining that thought process to say, actually, let's include this and let's make sure it works. That's the key.
I think it was something that when we were having a conversation, Glenn, with your co-founder Felix, about trying to start from the assumption that it's possible, you know, that you can be completely flexible, and then building in the constraints where they're needed, rather than, I think most organizations start from, well, we're here, well, we could give a little bit there, we could give a little bit there, and trying to shoehorn a bit of flexibility into it. So I thought that was quite an interesting thought, that just like almost take it all apart and start again if you really want this to work properly, and talk to people about what they want. Like you say, it's not just like, 3 days a week you're at home. It's got to be tailored and individual and flexible. The other thing, actually, is really, in one sense, it's a minor thing, but I think sometimes people overlook it. There's some real practical stuff about people working from home. You know, have they got a suitable place to work? Is it a safe workspace? Have they got, you know, your data security and things like that are all real practical considerations. And I think that frightens quite a lot of organisations too, just getting those sorts of, they're not little things, but those details right. And they worry about it, I think. I don't know what your experience is with that.
I've had clients saying that when they've got children, so it's like half-term week, are they then going to be really productive, you know, or are the kids going to take precedence, you know, making breakfast, having dinners, you know, interrupting meetings when you're online and things like that. So again, that's just something, and like you say, having the right place at home to work, you know, that's another aspect to be considered, really. If you're doing it on the kitchen table and the kids have got the Xbox on and they're cooking dinner, and there's those distractions then, aren't they, which got to be taken into consideration, really. So but again, that comes back to the individual. If they want that, they have to then prove that, okay, well, I've got this situation at home, but this is what we can do to make sure that I am productive in my hours, and I will take these steps to make sure I work and continue to work. So.
And it may well be that, going back to outputs again, it may be that they have a big week before half term, a big week after half term, with a view to only working 60% during half term, provided at the end the result over those 3 weeks is exactly the same. What's the problem?
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
It's a mind shift, isn't it, though, to think
it is.
I think it's not kind of the classic way of thinking.
No, absolutely not.
And then that sort of brings us on to, I think a lot of leaders and managers do worry about how to manage a remote team. Some managers aren't terribly good at managing their face-to-face team. So, this assumption of productivity is going to fall, and just sort of not knowing how to do it. Any thoughts about, what tools and skills managers need to be able to do this well?
From my point of view, it's all about proactivity. If you think back to when I was working in an office, the actual amount of time, and you could argue it's not productive time, but management by walking about actually is a fantastic thing, because you've got a temperature check of the organization, who's under pressure and all those kind of things, and you can have those casual conversations. Spending 2 hours a day walking around talking to people when you're a manager or a leader is never time wasted. And the thing is, fundamentally, you need to do exactly the same thing when people are remotely. And it might only be a 20-second phone call or a quick Teams chat or a Slack chat, whatever's suitable for your organization. And if they're working at 3 o'clock in the morning, actually just showing up and say, hi, how are you getting on? Is there anything I can help you with at 3 o'clock in the morning? You only have to do it a few times a year, but actually those things mean an awful lot to people. The fact that you're making an effort to find out about them.
Yeah, it just comes back to that knowing your employees. And I say lots of managers, they are concerned with output. Are they hitting their targets? What's employee A doing, employee B doing? Are they happy? Are they settled? Are there problems? Is there, all these other issues? And of course, then when someone joins a company and they're sat at home and they don't quite know, actually, if you're in an office environment, you could just reach over to your colleague and say, oh, I've just got this issue. That builds relationships. When you are at home, have they spent the last 2 hours trying to figure out something that would have taken 10 seconds on a phone call because they felt a bit awkward bringing in, So it's just making sure that they are comfortable, making sure and just reassuring them, look, any issues, just call, don't worry about it. I think that's the key. And that comes from management or team leaders. Just being there, understanding their team and making them aware that it doesn't matter to speak to them. Just be open. Let's just talk. I think that's the key, really. And not with some managers or team leaders just criticizing them when something's happened, talking to them, being constructive, reassuring them and praising them, really.
So much of it always comes back to communication, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely it does.
And
everything.
Totally with you, Glenn, on the whole management by wandering about. That's just sort of, that's one of my little mantras. And spending time catching people doing the right thing was another one I always used to like. So, being proactive and actually pointing out to them, that's brilliant. I love the way you've done that. And actually building that into remote working, I think is probably challenging for a lot of people, but it's not impossible.
No.
But I get the other thing there is the people higher up giving managers the time to do that. Yeah. And that's got to be built into the manager's day as well. And maybe sometimes they don't feel they do have the time to do some of that stuff.
No.
So I think building those regular check-ins and making that a part of normal management day is absolutely crucial, really. I think the other thing that a lot of people worry about, and you've sort of touched on it a bit, Dean, is how do you build that strong company culture? We hear a lot about culture and how do you make that strong? How do you onboard people? How do you make them feel a part of a team if you're entirely remote? Sorry, Matt, I realised you had your hand up then. I will come back to you in a minute.
Yeah, well, again, I think that key word is communication. You know, just saying to someone, oh, you know, welcome to the company, there's your computer, off you go, is one of the worst onboarding stories we hear, really. It's having that mentor, it's having that buddy. It's like, look, let's just check in a couple of days. Let's just make sure you're happy, is everything settled? And having that over, well, not just your 3-month probationary period, but for a long time, you know, if you're buddying with someone, just develop relationships. And it can be difficult. They say when you're remote, I know companies that have hired, you know, in COVID times, pandemic times, they've never even been to the office. They come to the office, and then that throws up a whole new set of challenges where it's like, oh, we've not met before, and you know, these interrelational type of situation. I'm actually going to get on with these people, so that puts a bit of you know, can be a bit anxious for people at times. Yeah, so again, it's diversity inclusion. It's huge, isn't it, really? So that inclusion part is just making sure that the whole company message is spread throughout from the top to the bottom, you know, and allowing people to be who they are, who they want to be, to voice their concerns, to voice any ideas, because then they're not scared to approach the managers. I think a lot of the times that sometimes it's like, look, I'm too busy, send me an email. Again, it's having that time to spend with them and to listen. I think that really then helps a lot of clients retain their people, because they know they're going to be listened to at the end of the day, which is a key area, I think, really.
Have you anybody much experience of using like these sort of virtual HQ type, you know, like things like Slack that promote themselves as being providing that informal space that you lose when people are working remotely? And I don't know if anybody's got any sort of positive experiences of anything like that.
I've heard of a lot of positive experiences with it, particularly private Slack channels, and it comes back to some of the stuff that Dean was just talking about in terms of giving an opportunity for people to have those informal conversations, because they don't want to look stupid. If you're banging out an email to your manager, how do I do X, when in potentially it could be a stupid question, you're not going to do it. So it's having that ability to just tap somebody on the shoulder and say, how does this happen around here? So I've seen Slack used quite a lot for that. I've heard of other organizations where somebody has a Teams call and they just leave it running, so people can drop in and out. So it becomes effectively just a conversation area where people can join in and say, anyone know how to do this? Or they can use the notes to say, I've got a quick question, can somebody help? So Teams I've heard of being used. Going back to the onboarding point, you made a really important couple of points there, Dean. The other thing I've heard about is people actually scheduling the first 4 weeks in a job in the office, and they rotate the rest of the team in during that 4 weeks. They actually get to know each other face to face before they go remote. So that I've heard used very successfully in a couple of organizations for a number of reasons. They don't get everybody in at the same time. It's just having a couple of people in every day for the first 4 weeks, so they can build those informal relationships up before they send somebody home with their laptop.
Yeah. And keeping those opportunities for that informal contact is so important.
Yes.
There's an awful lot goes on when you're waiting for the kettle to boil in a workplace, you know, and things that you wouldn't perhaps raise formally. You wouldn't send an email, but just kind of tap some of the, you know, oh, by the way, so and so, and it just builds that rapport, doesn't it? It builds that culture. Sorry, I'm going to come back to you now because you had your hand up earlier and I missed it and started talking. So
thank you. Just really to echo what Glenn and Dean, you've both been saying around this whole concept of checking in and walking the room. I think that's so important. And I think actually if people feel that they are cared about, that people actually care about how they're doing, that's going to lead to greater productivity. That's going to lead to that higher retention, as you mentioned as well. So for the manager who's focused just on the outputs, I think I agree with what you're saying. It should be a key part of their role, actually carving out that time, just check in with people, because the outputs will then look after themselves to a certain extent if your team really feel that connectedness. That was my point.
No, I couldn't agree more, actually. Yeah.
Now the interesting thing is, sorry to jump in, Kay, is having come from the project management world. So I spent 20 years as a IT project and program manager, delivering big stuff for the government and banks and various other stuff. And the bit that I find most frustrating about remote working is the fact that I got the most stuff done in the 15 minutes before a meeting starts and the 15 minutes after it finishes. because you've got the key players generally in the room, or you pass them in the corridor, and you can start building those relationships, ask how their family are and all those kind of things. And actually, would you mind just checking up on XYZ for me? Actually is done far better in a casual way than it is formally in a meeting where it's minuted and everyone's got their political grandstanding hat on. So actually, I think there are issues with the remote world that can't replicate what goes on in the real world at the moment in terms of getting stuff done, particularly if your job is interacting with people.
And that's management and leadership, isn't it, really?
It is management and leadership.
Always comes back to that too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that kind of leads us on a little bit, and some of what you said then, Matt. I think it's wrong to assume that actually everybody wants to work from home, because it really doesn't work for some people. Some people don't have the right space. Some people don't have the right headspace. You know, some people, the routine of going to work is what keeps them going. Maybe work's their main point of social contact. So I think that's one side of it that can be a problem. I think another is that there's that blurring of the boundaries. You haven't got the commute to or from work to switch modes, and it can lead to people being always on, working longer hours. I think there was quite a lot of evidence of that through the pandemic. So what can employers do you think, to support the mental health and the well-being of their teams when they're working remotely or maybe working very irregular hours?
Oh, sorry, go, you carry on, Claire.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, this is definitely something that when you're learning to work from home, when you're doing that change of routine, is then bringing in a new routine. And a lot of people actually started doing like a dummy commute, if you know what I mean, like literally leaving the house, walking around the block and coming back. And you leave the house in home mode, you come back in work mode. And it's, you know, it is one of those things. And if you're lucky enough to have like a different room, you can leave the hallway in home mode, and you, as soon as you work through the door, then it's, you know, and it's just kind of, yeah, just using those triggers. But, you know, like you were saying, you're definitely right though. It's just like, it does suit some people and it doesn't suit others. You know, it's kind of one of those things where, yeah, if you don't have the space and that kind of thing, and you're right about the headspace, and some people use it for social and that kind of thing, and some days it'll work for you and some days it won't. It's just kind of like, it is one of those, you know, I think sometimes we're very good, aren't we, as humans or whatever, we tend to kind of like, right, this is how it is, this is what we're doing, da 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 da, and then it's just kind of like, oh, but actually that's not going to work for me today, you know. And we're kind of like, sometimes we're not very flexible ourselves, you know, because we say about, you know, what flexible working, what's hybrid working. It's just kind of like, well, we need to kind of like actually see how that fits in ourselves as well. But yeah, definitely, you know, kind of like the keeping the, you know, the well-being going. It's like making sure you're getting up and moving around, making sure that you're getting out, you know, and not staying in the house or flat or whatever, and you know, and all things like that, and having, you know, not allowing things to stress you out, like kids shouting or dogs barking or something like that, you know. It's just kind of very much
taking a break every now and again.
Yeah,
exactly.
I was going to say, I think that's it. And sometimes we feel guilty. I felt it before. If I'm working from home and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to nip out at lunchtime, you know, I'd do that at work in the office, no problem, and I'd have a full hour. But when I'm at home, I'm like, oh yeah, but I'm at home, I just keep going, you know. And I think it's that guilt trip, really. I think just have a cup of tea, have a break, have your lunch, you know, go for a walk. There's no reason why you shouldn't. And I think that's the communication from your business again, your management, your employees, saying, look, you know, just because you're working remotely, we don't expect you to fill that time with just work. You've got to switch off. And when you would normally finish at 5 o'clock, I've said, right, okay, come 5 o'clock now, unless it's really important, I switch my computer. Well, that's it, I'm done. You know, I make sure I do it. And whereas up at the office, sometimes I'll run over till 5:30. So, you know, it should be the other way around, really, because then I'm traveling back. So but yeah, if you haven't got that commute, they think, well, because I'm doing an hour's commute, I might work a little bit longer. well, that's, it's good commitment, but do you really need to do it? Think of yourself sometimes and your mental health and well-being.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Glenn?
I used to work for a big bank, and it was quite interesting. I'd arrive in the car park quite early because I was arriving there from Bristol, so it was about an hour away. And I used to occasionally wander through the car park as I'd got out of my car, and I used to see people doing their ties up and putting their suit jacket on, and it was really putting on their suit of armour. And getting into office mode. And I've been, the last couple of years, I've ruminated about it quite a lot. And I think this comes back to giving the flexibility and what people need in terms of, you're right, there are some people who need to go to the office because they need the routine, they haven't got the circumstances at home, but the organisation needs to be able to accommodate that. You can't just mandate, we're going to go remote, we're going to go back to 5 days a week in the office, because for a whole pile of the office population, neither of those solutions are the right thing. There are going to be teams and people that need to be there 5-6 days a week, whatever it happens to be. But there are also going to be other people that don't need to be there for 2 days a month. It might be 1 day a month or 1 day a quarter. And in fact, I know one organisation that when I last spoke to them, they were talking about binning head office completely, and they were going to rent a Hilton hotel for a week a month. And they basically stay in a hotel for 4 nights, get all their meetings done, and everyone disappears off home again for the rest of the month. I need to catch up with them actually to find out how they're getting on, but I thought it was a great idea.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, I think one of the things I would say is managers need to be asking the right questions. It's no good just saying to somebody you're in charge of, oh, everything okay? And they say, yeah, I'm fine. And you leave it at that. It's got to be a bit more open questions, leading questions even, what can I do to help? What's going well? What's not going well? There's quite a good bit of tech out there as well, sort of apps and things. There's a chap I met at the Gloucester Business Show who's got a little app called Well Me that people can log in how they're feeling and what's going well. And he's got some wonderful stories about kind of the system almost crashing because everybody's stressed about the same thing at the same time and things like that. And it really alerts managers and leaders to what's going on behind the scenes. So there's some quite clever tech like that. I guess the other thing is about setting boundaries, isn't it? It's about expectations being very clear, that you don't expect them to always be on. You don't expect them to reply to the email at 9 o'clock just because you haven't sent them an email at 9 o'clock. And about opening up conversations about how people are feeling and how they're coping, and it being kind of okay to not always be okay. I think it's communication again, isn't it, I suppose?
You just raised you just raised a really important point about email, which is a horrible thing. I hate it with a passion, but the fact that an email arrives at 9 o'clock at night, somebody might be working odd hours. You don't have to respond to it then. It's asynchronous communication. If it's really important, that's what these are for. Pick up the phone. We don't speak to people enough. If email should be for information, non-urgent rubbish. It's not there for urgent, I need it now.
I think as well, it's respecting people's boundaries. If they're on holiday, you shouldn't be sending them emails. They should give them that downtime just to completely switch off. But just coming back to that flexibility with the company and their hybrid and how they're looking at things, I think it's to do with their overall, strategy of recruitment as well, and where they want to be in five years' time, because who knows where we'll be in 5 years' time. So it's having the ideas and okay, what business are we in? Where are we going to be? Where are we now? And working on that. And that comes from the top down to the managers to then disseminate that to their teams. And I think that's got to be a clear message. And then it can be, as a group, we will not do any hybrid working. Okay, fine. So how is that going to impact on retention and recruitment? And if they're happy with that, fine. That's what they've got to work with, isn't it? So, but that's a clear message. There can't be blurring the lines. It can't, we'll do this, we might do that. Do it, but an individual case-by-case study, yes. For, like you say, someone who wants to get in a bit earlier or a bit later, that's fine. But with the hybrid, I think sometimes it tries to be a bit more specific. We want someone in on Mondays because everyone's in on Mondays because, we have meetings on the Monday and that's it. The rest of the week is up to you. then that needs to be stipulated in, you know, in the contracts really, rather than just, oh yeah, you can choose when you're going to do it. And again, I think that's just one area for companies to think about really.
Yeah, setting those expectations and making it clear, isn't it?
Yeah. Especially for new employees, you know where you stand then. And pre that, I suppose, in interviews and job descriptions, you know, making sure it's 100% clear to people really. Because it's surprising that they don't do a lot of that in adverts.
No. So, I mean, another thing that comes up quite a bit is concerns. I think sometimes it might be used by business leaders who just want an excuse to get people back to the office, but that people who are working from home are kind of less visible. So they might be overlooked for promotions, training and development opportunities. And I am making a vast assumption here, and it is a, please don't quote me on this, but there is a likelihood, I think, that more people with, say, caring responsibilities might be choosing to work from home if they get the option. And so there are kind of potentially quality and diversity issues here and inclusion issues. So how can we make sure that organisations don't slide back in that respect? How do we make sure that people who are remote from the office actually get the same opportunities as the people who are physically present?
Glenn,
anybody want to dive in?
That's a really difficult one from the point of view of, if I was just, as you may have noticed, the glaze look in my eyes as I was thinking back to the previous environments I've worked in, and the snag is people get promoted on the basis of how good they are at stakeholder management. Is the really sad truth of big corporate world. Is it, you could be crap at your job, but if you're good at managing upwards, fundamentally you're going to get promoted. And the snag is making sure that people who are working remotely have the managing upwards nailed. That is the only way that people are going to get the same. In the real world, I think that's going to be the only way that they're going to get the same level of opportunity as those that are in the office. I mean, certainly organisations I've worked in the past, if you weren't based in the head office and even on the right floor in the head office, you weren't going to get promoted. And I think this is part of the cultural shift and part of the ramifications of going to a more flexible, more hybrid working model is we don't know how to do this yet.
No.
And it's like onboarding, like training, like promotion. There's going to be a whole pile of management and leadership stuff, measuring people's performance. Performance management itself is going to have to change as a result of adopting a more flexible, more hybrid working space. So I think there's a lot of people who are scratching their heads at the moment going, how on earth do we do this?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree on that. It is a bit of a quandary. And I think as well, it comes to that, you know, taking one step at a time, making sure they've got that hybrid flexible working models in place across the board. It's working well. And then you can then look at who might be in a certain position. You know, somebody might be great at their job. It's not a great man manager, you know, and it's understanding those types of individuals that would want to be able to take on that role. If someone's working hybrid because they're, you know, they're caring for a parent or a child or a partner, would they be able to take on that responsibility? Would they need it at that time in their life? And I think, again, it's that, it just always comes back to that communication and understanding those, the issues why, you know, and somebody might want it, who might be a bit afraid to ask, you know, who will be great at their job, are great at man managing, because they're more of a talker rather than, you know, someone who's like autocratic and you do this and you do that, which definitely doesn't work in today's society.
But also, I guess, not making the assumption that because somebody's got the caring responsibilities that they're not placed to take on the additional responsibility.
No, totally agree.
They wouldn't be interested because they're doing blah. And that's why I'm talking about the inclusion side of it, that those definitely. Assumptions that are made.
Well, it's given that opportunity to those people, isn't it? Sorry, Glenn, to apply within for that role, you know, and letting them know, not just going out to find somebody, but bringing those people up through the business.
I wonder if would you almost need, if in a largish organisation, somebody who was almost like the working from home champion person, you know, somebody who kind of coordinates this and is a manager of the people who are working remotely, who looks after their interests. I don't know. It's just a random thought at the top of my head.
But actually moving on, taking that sort of step further, we come back to the idea that what we started off on this seminar about, which was all about the change in attitude from the very top. Mm. So instead of the question being, okay, we know that blogs would be great at doing the job, but we don't think they would be interested because they've got other things going on in their lives, so therefore haven't got the capacity, then the question becomes, okay, we think blogs will be great at the job. How do we tweak the job to enable blogs to be successful? Yeah. What can we tweak? What can we change? What can we devolve? Whatever it happens to be. But that is a very different way of thinking that people are not used to.
It's really interesting.
Again, it's like a company by company basis, isn't it? You know, if you've got a manufacturing company, then they need people on the shop floor, and that normally comes with experience when they become a team leader, doesn't it? When they really understand the job. Doesn't make them great managers or team leaders. I've been told by lots of manufacturing companies, but you know, that tends to be the general way they do it. So it's going to be quite interesting. And I think that's what makes all of this really interesting, is to see where it's going to be. We have this again next year. You know, we have the same meeting, and what are we going to be talking about then? Has it all happened, or is it starting to happen? It's quite interesting, really.
Yeah. It'll still be a work in progress, I reckon.
No, I'm with you. I mean, I'm watching the picture change on almost a weekly basis as various bits of good practice come out, and you hear people having complete disasters. And I think we are very much. When we first started Springboard, actually, we wondered if this was going to be a 6-9 month opportunity and then everyone will be back to normal. Actually, I've come to the conclusion that we've got probably a 5 to 10 year period of change ahead of us as organizations learn how to accommodate all this stuff. Because as we're covering on this call, the tentacles of this run across the entire business.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's being scared, and it's being not scared to try. You know, are they worried? Some companies like, well, it might upset the balance, it might upset people, but if you don't try and you can't change, that's the key, isn't it, really?
You've got to always be prepared for things not to work and then try it in a different way. Yeah. I'm conscious that time is ticking on, and I know that the other people here have been able to sort of chip in a little bit to give you more opportunity if you've anything else you want to say. So I'm going to give one final question to you, Dean and Glenn. What would be your one top tip for a business leader who wants to make that culture shift for their organisation to become truly flexible?
My one top tip is get your management team together and make sure they're on board with you. Because it's not just you, it's all about the rest of them as well. And you only need one person who's not on board and they will undermine the entire effort. So make sure your board is on board.
Literally. And I think that's it. I think it's leading by example, and like I say, a lot of the CEOs, managing directors, business owners, I've been brought up, they're very much old school, and I think that's the thing. It's like, look, you know, this is not going to kill your business. It's not going to hamper the growth of the company. It's getting them to understand that this is a great change. It's a good thing. It's going to get you more people on board. It's going to get more buy-in from your employees. I think, and like you say, top down, right across the board, making sure everyone is bought into it, and then that just trickles down through the business, really. Yeah. That will take a lot of work, but yes.
I would say, I'd say communication, definitely, but also like keep an open mind. Don't assume that would never work here, because actually take a step back and think how could we make that happen, or what part of that could we make it happen. So don't kind of be blinkered about it.
Think what's right for your staff, not what's right for you.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, without your staff, you haven't got a company.
No.
That's the thing.
And I think Matt made the point, you know, if your staff feel that you're looking out for them and you're caring for them, they will be engaged and they will be more productive. It's such a key part of keeping people with you. Yeah. Anybody else want to add? Chuck into the mix, ask a question.
I was just going to say that, you know, at the end of the day, everybody, you know, to get people on board and to, you know, have people, you know, going through change and stuff like that, you kind of, it's all about the, you know, what's in it for me kind of thing. And if you can satisfy that for people, then they can then picture how their lives are then going to be, or their work life, their this, you know, kind of thing. So they can then like really like feel, or, you know, figure out, yeah, that's going to work for me, that's not going to work for me. And it's just kind of really kind of like, rather than just saying, right, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, you know, it's actually kind of like, right, this is going to benefit you in this way, or this is going to, you know, this is how it's going to look, you know, and just kind of really as well, I suppose, reach out to the different, you know, our different styles, you know, of, you know, the ways that, you know, this is how it's going to look, this is how it's going to feel, this is how it's going to, you know, kind of thing.
Spend a lot of time listening, I'd say, as well, rather than just talking. Actually listen. This is finding out what do you think.
It's like you were saying earlier with the assumptions. We all do it. We all do it, don't we? All the time. It's just kind of like we'll, you know, assume, you know, that somebody doesn't want to do something or does want to do something, or, you know, that kind of thing. And actually we haven't, you know, all we need to do is actually just ask. You know, I've had friends who, when I lived abroad, they were like, oh, well, I didn't ask you to come because I assumed you wouldn't want to, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, well, actually, I would like to have been asked, and, you know, and I probably would have come. But, you know, it's like, you know, that thing of, you know, talking and asking and communication and that kind of thing. But then again, you know, sometimes you need things to just be what they are without having to have these lengthy discussions with people and their input and that kind of thing. However, you know, the way you go around that then is, you know, kind of like, again, it's like, with this is what we're doing, and this is actually how it's going to benefit you, and that kind of thing. And then, you know, I suppose then have discussions after that to make sure that, you know, but no,
I think it's difficult to please everybody in an organization. It's not going to happen. But the thing is, if you're speaking to people and you've got the majority of people would like to do hybrid, then you go with the majority. You know, because at the end of the day, they might get bought into that kind of. Over time, they might be, like you say, people don't like change. They want to go to work, do their job, and go home. You know, and there's talk about change. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? You know. So it is, sometimes change can take a bit of time to incorporate into your workforce, but it, you know, like you say, selling those features, selling the benefits, how it's going to make them be better engaged, and that you're actually thinking of them. Again, that's going to really help, you know.
Any final thoughts from anybody else? No? Well, thanks everybody for coming along, and thanks Dean and Glenn for your clever contributions, thought-provoking, and thanks Jill for being in the background there and pulling levers and making things happen. The next session that we're running in this series is on the 24th of November, again at 12:30, and I'll be joined by Kim Wallen-Blake from Hughes Padson Solicitors, and we're going to be talking about dealing with disputes and conflict at work, which most people have some of them at some time or other. So I hope you can join us, and I hope you found this interesting, useful, or at least enjoyable. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.